Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I came back to Cedar Lake expecting peace. Instead, I found my fence torn down, strangers on my land, and a war I didn't start, but sure as hell would finish. They thought I'd roll over. They forgot one thing. I know how to fight, and this time, it's personal. I came back to Cedar Lake to find my land violated. It was a late afternoon, early spring. I just finished a 2-week consultancy job in Atlanta, some cross-county lawsuit over structural damage estimates. Good money, brutal hours. My wife Leah texted me earlier that morning. Can't wait to have you home. Cabin's quiet. Talia's been drawing that damn osprey again. I was ready for peace. Silence. Maybe a cold beer on the deck. Instead, I got blindsided the second I pulled off the gravel and rolled up my drive. The first thing I noticed, my fence was gone. The northern line, the one that hugged the lake, where I had clearly posted private property, no trespassing signs, was just gone. I stopped my truck so fast the tires spat up a spray of grit. Posts were lying in the grass like snapped matchsticks, wire curled in nests, and one of my signs was floating face down in the shallows, the kind of scene that makes your pulse crawl up your throat. And then I saw them. 3 guys in neon vests, 2 with weed trimmers and 1 with a clipboard, just casually landscaping my shoreline like they owned it. One was chewing sunflower seeds, spit flying while he directed the others. I stepped out of the truck, slow, calm. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice even. The clipboard guy turned without flinching. "Afternoon. We're with Cedar Lake Pines HOA maintenance, weekly beautification." I blinked. "You're standing on private property." He shrugged. "We've been instructed this is now community shoreline, common access corridor. You're outside new HOA alignment. Your fence was impeding resident flow." Resident flow. I walked slowly to where my fence used to stand, crouched, picked up one of the steel posts, still wet with mud. "You cut this down?" It was voted on. "You cut down my fence without notice. On private land." He glanced over his shoulder. "You'll have to take it up with the HOA president. She'll be here soon." She was. 15 minutes later, a black Lexus rolled up, tires crunching over broken cedar branches like bones. Out stepped Karen Vendler, HOA Queen Supreme. 60-ish tan blazer, high-volume perfume that hit me before she did. She carried a blue leather folio like it was the U.S. Constitution. "Mr. Brady," she called out as she strode over. "Glad I caught you." "I live here." "Yes, well, this is a delicate matter. I came personally. Cedar Lake voted last month to reclaim this section of lakefront. It's become increasingly clear this strip, this bottleneck, has been impeding neighborhood integrity." Neighborhood integrity. This is not a personal attack. It's about shared space. "Your fence, according to updated alignment plans, encroaches on what's now designated communal easement." I didn't say a word. I pulled out my phone, tapped record, aimed the camera at her clipboard and her face. Then I took a slow circle of the scene, my torn-up fence, her maintenance crew, the mangled shoreline. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask permission. She frowned. "What are you doing?" "Recording everything," I said. "For the court." "Please continue." Karen straightened. "You don't need to be confrontational. We're within our rights." "You're not within anything. This property's been mine for 7 years. The deed goes back to 1894. It predates your HOA by about a century and a half." "Well, that's debatable," she said, opening the folio. "Here's a Google Maps overlay from 2015 showing an open corridor, no fence visible. You've altered shoreline character and obstructed recreational flow. Did the Google Maps satellite sign off on this?" Karen pursed her lips. "Look, I don't want to escalate this, but we've voted. It's decided." I nodded once. "Great. Thank you." "Everything's recorded. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Her face twitched. "No need to be adversarial, Mr. Brady. We can resolve this neighbor to neighbor." "Too late for that," I said, gently picking up the broken sign from the lake, dripping, bent at the corners. "You tore down my boundary. Now we do this by the book." Then I turned, walked back to my truck, and drove straight to town. I'd fought plenty of battles in courtrooms, but this was personal, and they'd just declared war. By the time I got back to the cabin that night, Leah had already called 3 times, worried. I gave her the short version. "HOA tore down the fence, I'm handling it," but left out the part where I was chewing glass behind my molars. Talia was asleep. I sat on the porch with a bourbon and a legal pad and started listing everything I'd need. Surveyor, real estate attorney, archival property records, photos. I knew one thing from my days working litigation support: paperwork wins wars. The next morning, I went straight to the county recorder's office, then to zoning and cadastral mapping. It didn't take long to confirm what I already knew. My parcel Lot 12B was privately deeded and held in active servitude to the lake. Not a single square inch of it fell under HOA jurisdiction. The kicker: the northern fence line, now destroyed, was filed in the official registry in 1999 by the previous owner and then reaffirmed in 2008 as part of an erosion control agreement with the Department of Natural Resources. But HOA's documents told a different story. A neighbor tipped me off that Karen had distributed a PDF to residents labeled Corridor Reclamation Justification. I got my hands on it through a mutual acquaintance. It was amateur hour fraud. Google Maps screenshots from 2015 where trees obscured my fence, badly photoshopped overlays showing my parcel chopped and spliced into HOA greenbelt areas. No seal, no surveyor signature, just red arrows and Comic Sans text boxes saying things like intended path and recreational shoreline flow. They'd built their entire claim on satellite laziness. I sent everything I had to my attorney, Mason Lang. Guy's a beast. Ex-Marine JAG. Mid-50s, always looks like he's about to body slam a judge. He called me the next morning after reviewing my materials. Full send, he said. We file for trespass, destruction of private property, and declaratory judgment affirming non-HOA status. Want me to send a courtesy notice first? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Number file hard. Let them feel it. Mason submitted the civil complaint by Friday. We attached 15 photos, GPS metadata, zoning maps, and the original servitude deed from 1894. We also included a preservation of evidence request, because if HOA tried to clean up their mess, it would count against them. By Monday, I had a letter from Karen's attorney, some boutique HOA firm with a name like Graves, Blunt, and Hancock, full of smug phrases like misunderstanding, common purpose, and inter-community access expectations. They asked me to reconsider. The suit in the spirit of cohesion and good neighborly conduct. I declined. What really set my teeth on edge, though, wasn't the legal maneuvering. It was what I saw 2 days later while walking the boundary. New flag markers staked along my old fence line, as if HOA was preparing to landscape it again. I followed them for maybe 50 yards until I found a laminated sign zip-tied to a tree. Future access trail, community improvement in progress. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just petty overreach. This was strategy. They were trying to reclassify my land through public perception bit by bit, like squatting by landscaping. I called Mason again, and we added a cease and desist demand, this time including account for malicious misrepresentation of property status. But while Mason worked the court, I started digging deeper. If they were bold enough to cut down my fence and mark my land with HOA signage, what else were they trying to pull behind closed doors? I found out sooner than expected. That Thursday, a buddy from the county clerk's office tipped me off that Cedar Lake Pines HOA had submitted a grant application to the county's Green Access Restoration Program, a public beautification initiative. The application included maps. I pulled them. There it was in black and white. A proposed lakeside access corridor running directly across my property, labeled as Restoration Parcel B. The justification? Previously uncontrolled access point reclaimed for community shoreline integration. And guess what? The images included in the grant packet were cropped shots from my own trail cameras, the ones I'd had facing the waterline, screenshotted, labeled, and submitted without my knowledge, which meant someone had been on my land without my knowledge after the fence was down. That wasn't bold. It was criminal. They weren't just stealing property. They were trying to rewrite the record. It was time to push back. 6 days after filing suit, I got a letter that nearly made me spit coffee all over my workbench. It wasn't from Karen. It was from the county auditor's office notifying me that I was listed as an interested adjacent party in the tax auction of a neighboring parcel, a 0.35-acre lot directly bordering my lakeside boundary. The sender? Former owner Karen Vendler. For a solid 10 seconds, I thought it was a prank. Then I checked the parcel ID. Nope, real. Karen had apparently defaulted on property tax payments for 2 years straight. Her name was still on the title, but the county had slapped the land with a lien, scheduled it for a public tax sale, and I, Being the neighboring landowner was legally entitled to notification. I sat down and let that sink in. Karen, the queen of HOA virtue and shoreline beautification, had let her own parcel rot into foreclosure, and not just any parcel, the one with a weathered storage shed and a private dock that practically jutted into my line of sight. I didn't tell Mason, not yet. I wanted to do my own recon first. That evening, I walked the border under the fading light. It was quiet. Leah and Talia were at a piano lesson in town. I went alone, boots crunching along the tree line until I hit the far end of my property and stepped into the lot in question. The shed was there, padlocked warped door, boat dock still intact but moss-covered. I noticed an old HOA sign nailed to a pine tree, mostly faded. Designated storage, lakeside maintenance. The irony was delicious, but something else caught my eye. A thin plastic cable, barely noticeable, ran along the edge of the shed wall, tucked just beneath the overhang. It vanished into a tiny plastic box mounted inside a wooden post, part of the old fence line, the same fence Karen's crew had torn down. I stepped closer. The box had no markings, but I recognized it from my military days. It was a low-range audio surveillance unit, the kind used in construction sites and hunting cabins. Someone had mounted it in the post facing my property. I didn't touch it. Instead, I jogged back up to the house, pulled out a backup phone, and recorded video. Full sweep, serial number, GPS tag, audio commentary. Then I called an old buddy, Evan Ghost Merrill. We'd served together back in Fallujah, and now he made a tidy living debugging corporate boardrooms and paranoid tech bros lake houses. 2 days later, Ghost showed up in a busted Tacoma with 3 cases of equipment and a 7-Eleven burrito in his hand. "You sure you want to know what they're hearing?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as he unpacked a signal scanner. "Positive," I said. "If they've got ears on me, I want to bite back." By sundown, he'd found 2 separate mics. One was the box I'd seen. The second, buried inside the hollow top rail of a repurposed fence post just 30 feet from my porch. That one was live. Ghost tapped the feed and played back a clip. My voice from 2 days ago walking the border and muttering to myself about the dock. Clear as day. Then Mason's voice from a speakerphone call the same night. "Jesus," I muttered. Ghost nodded. "This wasn't cheap Amazon garbage. This is pro gear. Battery-sustained encrypted loop storage with Wi-Fi fallback. Someone paid good money to know what you're planning." We bagged both devices, tagged them for evidence, and I drove straight to the sheriff's department. I gave a statement and handed over the recordings. The deputy on duty nearly choked when he heard Mason on the wiretap. "This is a Class C felony if it holds up," he said. "And if it was HOA property when it was planted, we're going to need to look at intent." I called Mason from the parking lot. "They planted bugs," he barked. "Looks that way." Oh, hell. This just went from property dispute to criminal invasion. I'm filing a motion to freeze HOA funds tomorrow. If they're using dues to finance surveillance, the board's gonna bleed. "And the tax auction," I added, smiling into the phone. There was a pause. "What tax auction?" "Karen's shed lot. It's up for sale. I've been notified." "You're shitting me." "Nope. Bidding starts next Tuesday." "Well," he said, chuckling grimly, "I'd say it's about time the lake got a new dock owner." The auction was held in a drab little annex building behind the county courthouse. Linoleum floors, flickering fluorescents. One tired ceiling fan that squeaked every full rotation. I wore jeans, boots, and a collared shirt, just clean enough to avoid a stink eye from the clerk. Leah offered to come, but I told her no. This wasn't a date. It was a surgical strike. I got there early enough to scout the room. Only a dozen people showed, most of them land speculators in golf shirts and hush puppies, flipping through manila folders and muttering about zoning overlays. I didn't see Karen. That was surprising. Or maybe she'd figured out by now what was happening and couldn't stand to watch the crown slip off her own head. The auctioneer, a sunburned man in a bolo tie, rattled through 3 non-waterfront lots, then paused to introduce Parcel 11D, former storage use, dock access, northern Cedar Lake sector. That was her shed lot, my lot, in about 15 minutes. Starting bid was $2,800. I waited. No hands, no clicks. I let the pause drag, then raised my bidder paddle like it was just another Tuesday. The gavel fell 20 seconds later. Sold. Parcel 11D, Mr. Austin Brady. Congratulations. I nodded once and walked out before the echo settled. 3 days later, I had the deed in hand. By Saturday, I'd already brought in contractors. They installed a solid cedar privacy fence around the perimeter, bolted the gate with a key code lock, and ran cabling for 3 new motion cameras. Then I hung a metal sign at eye level just inside the entrance. Private property. New ownership trespassers will be prosecuted. Dock access by permission only. The same day, I received a typed letter from the HOA, unsigned, asking if I would voluntarily consider restoring public shoreline flow to Parcel 11-D in good faith and spirit of harmony. I pinned it to the inside wall of the shed next to a hornet nest and shut the door. That weekend, Karen made her reappearance. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I saw her walking the lakeshore trail with a tablet in hand and her usual expression of thin-lipped martyrdom. She stopped about 30 feet from the new fence, squinted, and lifted her tablet to take photos through the slats. I walked down calmly. "Need a better angle?" I asked. "I can bring you the title paperwork if you want." She jumped slightly, then lowered the tablet. I was documenting potential encroachments. "On your old land," I said, tilting my head. "That's not yours anymore. It was acquired under suspicious circumstances. It was acquired under your failure to pay taxes for 2 years, which I believe is called negligence. Not that I'm a lawyer." Karen's nostrils flared. "This is retaliation." "No," I said. "Retaliation would have been paving over your roses. This is called ownership." She turned and stormed off, muttering something about an injunction. I didn't follow. Instead, I made a quiet mental note. She hadn't denied the surveillance devices. That was telling. By the following Wednesday, I got the official notice. Karen had filed a civil motion claiming I'd purchased the property in bad faith and was intentionally disrupting community harmony. She included the word hostile 9 times in 2 pages. Mason read it aloud while eating a donut. "This is fluff, desperate fluff. She's throwing everything at the wall. Think it'll stick," he smiled. "We're going to bury her in precedent so deep she'll need sonar to breathe." But Karen wasn't done playing. The next morning, 2 things happened. First, I found a bundle of fresh HOA lawn flags staked just outside my new fence, each one labeled Designated Access Point, Pending Review. There were 12 of them. I kicked one over and it came up easy. No depth, no weight, just optics. Second, one of my neighbors, an older guy named Henry who lived across the road and spent most mornings sanding birdhouses on his porch, walked up holding a flyer. "She's canvassing again," he said, handing it to me. The flyer was titled, "Help Restore Our Lake, Unified Corridor Campaign." It had a diagram showing my property cut out of the lakefront like a diseased organ, with dotted lines running through potential access pathways. Beneath that was a signature. Form labeled, "Yes, I support temporary boundary flexibility for the betterment of Cedar Lake." "Did you sign it?" I asked. Henry snorted. "I told her the only corridor I need is to the fridge. But she's hitting up everyone. She's offering to waive dues for 3 months if folks sign." "She bribing people now?" He shrugged. "Sure, looks like it." And that's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just trying to reclaim land. She was building a narrative, constructing the illusion that I was the obstacle to some larger community dream. But what she didn't know was that one of the residents she visited that same day had a Ring camera pointed right at their porch, and it recorded every word of her offer. The video was a gift from heaven. Karen had no idea the sweet old woman she'd tried to pressure into signing her corridor initiative had a porch camera, or maybe she forgot. Either way, the footage was damning. I watched it on my laptop that evening with Leah sitting beside me, jaw clenched. Karen, wearing her usual khaki dictator uniform, stood on the porch, smiling wide and talking in that syrupy HOA tone that dripped with superiority. "It's not a boundary violation," she said, hands fluttering. "It's more of a temporary compromise. For the community." Then she leaned in conspiratorially and added, "And of course, if you help us out, we'd be willing to overlook a few of those landscaping code issues. Plus, no dues till spring." Leah hit pause and stared at me. She just offered to bribe a retiree with HOA immunity. "Yep," I said, sipping my coffee, and tried to spin it as altruism. The homeowner had already sent me the full clip and signed a statement. I forwarded it straight to Mason, along with the flyers, the flags, and a detailed account of Karen's property being used in the fake maps she'd submitted for that damn grant. Mason called the next morning in a voice I hadn't heard since the day he got a judge to sanction a developer into bankruptcy. "She's cooked," he said. We're filing an emergency motion to freeze discretionary HOA spending. Fraudulent inducement plus witness tampering plus undeclared lobbying. And that grant application. I pulled the whole thing. She filed it under a fake nonprofit. What? Friends of Cedar Lake Nature Path. It doesn't exist. It's just a Gmail account and a P.O. box. That's wire fraud. I blinked. You think the DA will bite? She might. I'm sending this to the State Ethics Commission. Karen's not just screwing with your fence anymore. She's hijacking public money with fake ecology fluff. It only got juicier. While Mason worked the courts, I did some quiet recon. A friend of mine from the zoning board owed me a favor, so I got access to the grant's attachments. It included a full-color brochure titled Reclaiming the Lake for the People, complete with drone shots of degraded land, my property, glowing descriptions of a restoration trail, and, my personal favorite, quotes from anonymous residents, including one that read, "It's been sad watching the lake get cut off by angry landowners. It used to feel like home." I choked on my coffee when I saw that one, but what really burned was the inclusion of imagery lifted directly from my trail cameras, the same cameras I'd installed for wildlife watching. My footage, my shoreline, cropped and filtered to look like neglected swampland. This meant one thing: someone had accessed my devices without my consent. Again, I checked my camera SD cards. Some files were missing, with last modified dates during the week when HOA's maintenance crew had been on my land. They must have pulled the cards, grabbed what they wanted, and reinserted them. Sloppy. I had the trail cam manufacturer confirm the timestamps were altered post-recording. That gave me the chain of evidence break I needed. Another criminal layer to stack on Karen's growing tower of bad decisions. Meanwhile, her corridor campaign was unraveling. Turns out she'd offered access incentives to at least 6 other households, free HOA lawn care, landscaping reimbursements, even pool passes for signing what she called non-binding boundary realignments. 3 of those people flipped when Mason sent subpoenas. One of them even brought a printed thank you note from Karen that read, "Your support helps us move the community toward its most unified future yet. Don't worry, we'll handle the paperwork." It was notarized. By now, I wasn't just dealing with a pissed-off HOA president on a power trip. I was watching a woman build a fake movement, manufacture documentation, and prey on gullible neighbors under the guise of community improvement. The worst part? She was good at it. Really good. Her language was vague, polished, just careful enough to sound civic-minded instead of psychotic, but the cracks were spreading. At the next HOA board meeting, word leaked that 2 of her own board members had resigned, citing serious ethical concerns and potential exposure to litigation. One even posted anonymously on a local forum, saying they'd been pressured to falsify project timelines and budget data to keep the corridor plan looking viable. Leah found it. She showed me. I screenshotted every word. That same night, I got an envelope taped to my mailbox. No return address, just a single sentence typed in bold. "You think this is over. You've made enemies." I smiled, took a photo, and filed it with the rest of the evidence. Then I took the letter inside, made myself a drink, and wrote up a new motion request. If Karen wanted war, I was going to give her one, with footnotes. The first hearing on the injunction drew more attention than I expected. It wasn't even a full trial, just a preliminary motion about the spending freeze on HOA discretionary funds. But the courtroom was packed. Local reporters, curious neighbors, a pair of retirees in matching windbreakers who apparently attended every zoning dispute like it was a baseball game. Karen showed up late, trailing behind her lawyer like a dog who'd eaten the couch cushions. Gone was her usual smug calm. She looked tight around the jaw, and she kept glancing at me from across the room like I might bark Latin and set the walls on fire. She didn't say a word. Her attorney did all the talking. And it wasn't much. Mason eviscerated them. He walked the judge through the timeline, the illegal fence demolition, the fake grant application, the altered drone maps, the porch cam recording, the trail cam file tampering. He even brought a small USB speaker to play 30 seconds of Karen offering HOA favors in exchange for temporary land use alignment. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with bench fatigue permanently etched into her brow, just raised one eyebrow and asked, "Are you seriously suggesting this was a misunderstanding?" Karen's lawyer muttered something about community cohesion and administrative missteps. The judge cut him off. Motion granted. Funds frozen until further notice. Plaintiff's counsel prepared discovery framework. When I turned around, I caught Karen watching me with eyes that didn't blink. She knew what was coming. Later that week, Mason and I sat down to prep for full discovery. That meant pulling every HOA internal communication we could get. Emails, meeting notes, anything touching on corridor restoration or my property. Karen, of course, tried to delay everything. Her excuse: the HOA laptop was lost during routine replacement. Some documents were mistakenly overwritten. The volunteer secretary moved and took her notes with her. Amateur hour. We subpoenaed their cloud backups, and that's when it got spicy. Among the emails recovered from the HOA's Gmail were 2 threads that told me everything I needed to know. One was titled Strategy Brady Resistance Plan, in which Karen outlined ways to encourage non-confrontational social pressure on me, including neighborly visits, controlled messaging, and, I kid you not, fencing fatigue. The second thread was worse. It included a forwarded invoice from Greenview Security Systems addressed to HOA with the line item, Surveillance Deployment, Shoreline Corridor Buffer, Client Confidential QDI, 2 low-vis audio units, installs complete March 17th. I read it 3 times. My stomach dropped. They'd paid for the bugs, the ones we'd found in my fence post and the shed, and they called it a shoreline buffer. Mason's mouth flattened into a smile. You ready to get criminal? We handed it off to the sheriff's office that same afternoon. They contacted the DA and opened an investigation into illegal surveillance and misuse of association funds. The HOA board was formally notified, and within 48 hours, 3 more board members resigned, leaving Karen nearly alone at the helm of a sinking ship. It didn't stop her. She showed up 2 days later with a new crew, some desperate lawn care guys, and a fresh contractor truck to install a set of benches and solar-powered lamps along the edge of what she now called the Unity Green. That was her new term for the same stretch of land she kept trying to steal. Only problem? The new benches were on the very border between my land and the parcel I'd bought at auction. I watched from the porch, called Mason, and then walked down with a fresh printout of my survey. Karen was standing with a clipboard directing the workers like a suburban general. When she saw me, her face didn't twitch. "I hope you're not here to cause a scene," she said. "No scene," I replied, handing her the document. "Just making sure you're aware that the bench you're installing is 3 feet inside my property line." She took it, scanned it, then laughed. Actually laughed. "I don't recognize this survey. It's not from the HOA's approved list, because your HOA doesn't govern me." "Well," she said, tucking it under her arm, "maybe you should reconsider joining. It would simplify all of this." I blinked. "You tried to bug my house." "I tried to build community," she snapped, "and you're the one poisoning it." Then she turned and stormed off. I let the workers finish unloading the bench, then calmly taped a fresh notice to it. Private property, temporary structure under investigation, unauthorized placement. Do not sit. By that evening, someone had spray-painted the word tyrant on my mailbox. Classy. I installed new cameras, hired a security guy to sweep the property weekly. I wasn't just defending a boundary anymore. I was defending truth, and truth had teeth. 2 weeks after the surveillance invoice surfaced, Karen was served, personally. Not by mail, not through her lawyer. A real deputy, in full uniform, walked right up to her during a midweek HOA gathering under the pergola behind the clubhouse and handed her the papers. I didn't see it in person, but someone filmed it on their phone and posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group. The caption read, "When HOA presidents get caught playing CIA." The comments were gold. My favorite was, "If she plants bugs better than she plants flowers, we're all in trouble." Karen disappeared for 4 days after that. Rumor was she'd fled to her sister's place in Tennessee, though one board member suggested she was unavailable due to medical distress. I didn't care where she was. All I knew was that the sheriff's department had confirmed an open criminal investigation into illegal surveillance, electronic eavesdropping, and misappropriation of community funds. The DA hadn't filed charges yet, but it was only a matter of time. While the storm brewed on the criminal front, our civil case moved ahead like a freight train. Mason filed a motion for summary judgment on all counts: trespass, property destruction, unauthorized land use, and fraudulent misrepresentation. He didn't just want compensation. He wanted declaratory judgment that HOA had zero authority over my land, past, present, or future, but Karen had one last card to play. She filed a counterclaim. The paperwork was laughable. She accused me of orchestrating malicious resistance, claimed I was harassing volunteers, manipulating neighbors, and even weaponizing isolationist sentiment to subvert civic development. That last one made Mason spit coffee. He held up the page and said, "This sounds like something out of a Cold War spy novel. Is she accusing you of psychological warfare? Guess I've been busy." The court scheduled both motions for the same hearing. That meant all of it would go in front of the judge. Our claims, her counterclaims, and everything we had on record. Mason said to bring a suit and expect to testify. But before any of that happened, the dominoes started to fall. It started with a quiet letter from the State Grant Committee. They had completed their review of the fake Friends of Cedar Lake application. The result, the grant was revoked permanently. Karen was barred from applying to any state or county development program for 5 years. Then came the IRS audit notice. Apparently, someone had reported the phantom nonprofit she used to apply for the grant. Since she had used a fake EIN and a fake mission statement to solicit public funds, it triggered a fraud flag. The audit wasn't my doing, but I had a hunch one of the ex-board members tipped them off. Then came the real kicker. A notice from the County Real Estate Oversight Committee. The original parcel map used in her grant filing had been flagged as tampered. A GIS technician had cross-referenced her submission with the official 2021 record and noticed her file showed my lot as Greenbelt when, in fact, it was clearly private land with servitude access on record since the 1800s. They referred the case to the DA as map falsification under public trust violation. That's a felony. I read the notice 3 times. Karen's empire, her little HOA fantasy land of corridors and committees, was crumbling. No one was covering for her anymore. The remaining board members voted to suspend her from all HOA leadership pending legal outcomes, and a new interim president was named, Jerry Malcolm, a retired UPS regional manager who lived 2 streets over and who, to my knowledge, hadn't wiretapped anyone. The day after her suspension, I was walking my dog along the old trail path when I spotted Karen at the lake's edge. She was alone. No clipboard, no phone. Just standing there, staring at the fence. I almost walked past her, but then she turned. "You think you've won," she said, voice tight. "But this isn't over." I sipped from my thermos. "You're right, the criminal part's just starting." She flinched at that, looked down at the water, and for once didn't have anything rehearsed to say. I watched her for a moment, the woman who tried to rewrite property law with clip art and HOA bylaws, standing on ground she used to rule. "Want me to print you a map?" I said. "One with your name crossed out?" She turned and walked away without a word. I let her go. The lake was quiet. 3 months later, the courtroom smelled like old carpet, burnt coffee, and defeat. Karen sat at the defense table, flanked by her 4th attorney in as many weeks. Her blazer was the same shade of beige she always wore, but this time it looked less like authority and more like camouflage. I sat across the aisle with Mason, crisp tie, fresh copies of every motion and exhibit organized in labeled folders. Leah was behind me. Talia stayed home, too young to watch grown-ups torch each other over land and ego. The judge took her seat, flipped through our filings, and wasted no time. "On the matter of Brady V's, Cedar Lake Pines HOA and Vendler," she said. "I've reviewed the record, heard the evidence, and weighed the claims and counterclaims." She looked over her glasses at Karen. "Let's begin with the facts." Over the next 40 minutes, the judge laid it out like a coroner reading from an autopsy. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my land. The fence was lawfully placed. The servitude access predated even the township's founding charter. The destruction of my property constituted unlawful trespass. The surveillance equipment, a criminal matter, already referred to state authorities. Then came the counterclaim. Karen's malicious isolationism theory got shredded. Not only does the court find the counterclaim lacking in factual basis, the judge said, it appears designed primarily as a retaliatory distraction. Then she turned to the matter of damages. In light of the property destruction, privacy violation, and the plaintiff's legal expenses, I'm awarding Mr. Brady compensatory damages of $42,000. Karen flinched like she'd been slapped. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, the court orders the removal of all unauthorized HOA signage and structures within 15 feet of the Brady property line. Enforcement is authorized via county code compliance. Furthermore, the HOA is prohibited from referencing or including the Brady parcel in any future community planning documentation. And finally, effective immediately, Ms. Vendler is barred from holding any executive position within the Cedar Lake Pines HOA for a period of no less than 5 years. Reinstatement subject to a court review. Bang! Gavel down. We walked out into the sun. The air was thick with summer humidity, but it felt light on my shoulders. Mason shook my hand and told me he'd seen oil executives go down with more dignity than Karen. I believed him. Back at the cabin, I poured myself a beer and stepped out to the porch. Leah was unpacking groceries. Talia was scribbling on a notepad, sketching what looked like a tree with eyes. I walked down to the new fence. The cameras were online, motion sensors humming, and the shoreline was quiet except for the sounds of water and wind through pines. In the weeks that followed, I made good on a little promise I'd been thinking about since the day I bought Karen's lot. I rolled in a vintage camper trailer, painted it forest green, and parked it right where her shed used to stand. Then I added a sign, Brady Kayaks, rentals by invitation only. I didn't advertise, didn't post it online, but a few friends, a few neighbors who'd stood up and spoken the truth, they got private access. Leah added a coffee station inside the trailer. Talia drew little osprey stickers for the kayaks. One Saturday, as I was locking up after a couple from across the cove returned their paddles, I saw her again, Karen, walking alone along the public part of the lake path, phone in hand, snapping photos at a distance. Probably for another complaint. I didn't wave, just sipped my coffee and leaned on the gate. She looked at the trailer, at the sign, at the people laughing by the dock, and her face twisted into that same brittle smile she used to wear at HOA meetings. Then she turned and walked back the way she came. Since then, she's kept her distance. The HOA elected a new board, rewrote their internal bylaws, and to their credit, issued a formal apology, signed and mailed. I framed it and hung it in the shed. Not out of spite, just as a reminder that boundaries matter. And that when someone comes for your land with fake maps, bad law, and a clipboard, the only proper answer is truth, backed by steel posts, real deeds, and a damn good lawyer.